Hello, how you doing? Dr. D here. I wanted to take this time to do a video on grief. Recently, as of yesterday, Kobe Bryant, superstar NBA player, legend, passed away suddenly in a helicopter crash. And, of course, when things like this happen, media will be posting a lot of things about the event and the aftermath. But grief is something that grief and loss is something that everyone experiences, whether you're famous or not. If you're living, you're going to experience death. One, your own, but then people that you love and care about. And so I thought it was appropriate to share some things about grief to help you to be able to cope with it. There are different models and strategies of grief, but one in particular that I like is it's simple to understand but profound in your healing process. It is the Keebler Ross Kessler model. It's a tongue twister, so I always have to read it. It's the 5 stages of grief. And so I share this oftentimes with my clients at any type of loss, not just death, but it could be loss of a job. It could be loss of status. It could be loss in identity. For example, if you are a parent and all of your kids leave the home and you have an empty nest, that loss, it's not just the empty house, it is something that's no longer there. But today, mostly I'm comparing this or using this model to help you address grief related to death, but I want you to understand that the process of grief is no different. In this model, the 5 stages are first denial, then anger, bargaining, depression, and lastly, acceptance. So I'm going to briefly share each of those stages with you. Took a few little notes here so I can make sure that I don't miss anything. So denial, you've heard that probably a billion times in different things. Like if someone has a substance use problem or something like that, they're in denial. They're not accepting that. This is a different type of denial, though. This is you have come to realize that there is a loss, that someone has died. You're cognizant of that. But in the denial phase, what happens is your brain literally sends chemicals through your body in order to numb you, so that this experience, this tragedy, and tragedy, not just saying Kobe Bryant, I'm talking about the tragedy of losing someone you care about. So it won't overtake you. It's a lot to consume at once. And so our brains are very adaptive. And so it starts to numb us. And so while you could be going through the motions of planning the funeral, going to the funeral or homecoming or whatever you may call it, you still may just be like going through the motions. There's a numbness there, and that's totally appropriate. And this is usually time when people are just like they're moving, but it's almost like they're not there. They don't necessarily feel like themselves. Someone may ask them how they're doing, and they'll say, "I'm fine." And people might feel confused as to why they're fine and they just lost someone. Well, the brain is helping. The brain is helping the body and the rest, the whole individual, to be able to slowly adapt to this big change. Okay. The second stage is anger. Anger, I say this all the time, anger gets a bad rep, okay? Anger is a natural emotion. The problem with anger is how we respond to it. And so someone may begin to feel anger during grief and then have guilty feelings about it because, again, anger gets this bad name like we're not supposed to have it. But it is a natural part of the healing process. And so now the numbness has gone, and now the person has these negative feelings or something that they have to deal with, and so they tend to want to project it onto something. Again, a natural product of the process. So they may become angry with themselves. They may become angry with someone else. They may become angry with something. For example, there's been cases and times with clients that I've had where they lost a parent, an elderly parent, or they lost someone to a terminal illness, and after the denial is over, they begin to get angry. They may get angry at the nursing staff or the healthcare staff. They may get angry at another family member. It's almost like trying to find something to blame in order to be able to push this feeling off. And be mindful, if you're around someone like this, to be empathic and know that it's not them targeting you. It's really essentially a part of the healing process, because there's a stage afterwards. But again, it's coming from being completely numb to the brain saying, okay, there's still something that I have to deal with, and I don't want to deal with it. So the person becomes angry. And if you're the one experiencing grief, although guilt is a natural emotion, if you recognize what anger represents in this process, then you won't add another negative emotion on top of that. As a matter of fact, when I have people to come in and see me, and they've been seeing me for a long period of time, and they lose someone, I don't even address whatever they are coming to therapy about. I immediately begin to educate them on grief, because I want them to be okay. I want them to know that there's a process so that they can go through it in a healthy way. Okay. Next is the bargaining, because after they've left the anger, and anger is just essentially like they're feeling deserted, and so they become upset about it. The bargaining is the what if stage. The what if stage is like, what if I had said this? What if I had done this? What if I could go back in time? For some people, if they're religious, they may start bargaining with God. They have this feeling that they would do anything to get that person back. And so again, now this is a part of the mind trying to rationalize what has happened and rationalize a way to get the loved one back. Although they're still knowledgeable and cognizant that the person is deceased, that knowledge nonetheless does not prevent them from trying to mentally process a way to undo it. Okay. And then after they move through the bargaining stage, the depression stage comes in. And this stage may not need as much explanation, because depression is, everyone experiences that, but there's an emptiness and a sadness. And so now the emotions go from just like a flat line of nothing to this big surge of anger, to this bargaining, and then now the slump of sadness and emptiness, because it's like, oh no, this is real. This is really happening. And so the person will feel empty. This is more of the stage that people look for in the beginning, because they're expecting people to be crying and just depressed and just mulling over their loved one early on, but they don't understand the process. And so, whereas depression may not take as long as some people may think, but it can. Bargaining takes a few weeks. I forgot to mention this. Can take a few weeks to some months. Depression could take some few weeks to some months. It can take a lot longer if there are not some things in place, which I'm going to talk about in a moment. But nonetheless, any of these stages, there's not a set time. For every individual person, it's different. So just be mindful that while these stages are pretty much linear, they look different for everyone. Because, for example, for someone that lost someone that was terminally ill, they may have started this grieving process once they got the diagnosis that someone was going to die prematurely. And so someone may think, okay, for example, someone died a family member died from cancer, and they're expecting in the beginning, as soon as the death occurs, that the person would, just be all out depressed and distraught, but the person is like, no, I've accepted that they're gone, and they're trying to figure out how could you lose someone and be there already. Well, what they weren't aware of is that that person had started that grief process way before their loved one had died, because they had like a forewarning. Not that it was any less shocking, but they had a forewarning before they actually died that they were going to die prematurely. And so, and then finally is the acceptance phase. And so, if you're experiencing grief right now and you're at the denial stage, or you're at the early anger stage, or even bargaining or depression, know that acceptance comes. And people just don't know that, you know, they're not going to wake up one day and they'll look at their calendar and says 90 days has passed, I'm going to hit acceptance. No, it's different for everyone. But what that feels like is not that the person becomes okay, like thinking, okay, good, no problem, I lost my loved one. No, they're saying it's okay, I'm going to be okay. And they start to move on. And so the way that let me give you about 3 ways that you can learn to deal with grief. First and foremost, accept that grief is a natural part of the human experience, because loss is. Number 2, surround yourself with supportive people, okay? Supportive, healthy people. But also, in surrounding yourself with healthy, supportive people, be okay with walking away from people if you need to. That means if you need to turn your phone off, if you need to get off social media, if, you know, a lot of times people want to rally around you and support you, but it could be overwhelming at times. And so to say to someone on a certain day or for a couple of days, says, listen, I just really don't want any company right now. I just really need some time. It may just be me and family, or I just need some time to myself. Okay. And thirdly, be okay with asking for help. I am a psychologist, and so I work in the mental health field, but you don't just have to have a psychologist. You could talk to a pastor or spiritual advisor. You can talk to someone else who has lost someone. You can join a support group. So those are some things that you can do. And here's a bonus one: exercise. Believe it or not, when we are going through a negative emotion, exercise, and walking in particular, that could just mean, instead of just walking to your car or walking to your mailbox, walking past your car down the block and coming back to circle back to get into your car. It could be that simple, just to start to generate some endorphins and some other neurochemicals into your body. So I hope this was helpful for you. If you have any questions about grief or other mental health things, please feel free to ask questions in the comments. Please follow me on Facebook at Danita Morales Ramos, or on Instagram, Danita Morales at Danita Morales Ramos 1. And take care of yourselves, okay?